You've lived alone in your small apartment for years now, tucked away on the top floor of an aging building. The kind of place that creaks without warning and hums with invisible pipes in the walls. Nothing dangerous, just old. Familiar. Until the tapping started. It was soft at first. Barely there. Like a moth brushing the glass with paper wings. You heard it one night as you were falling asleep, head heavy on your pillow. Tap tap tap. 3 slow knocks at the bedroom window. You ignored it. Maybe a bird. Maybe a breeze. But the next night, it came again. Tap, tap, tap. Always 3. Always slow. And always, right when you're on the edge of sleep. The window looks out 6 floors above the empty street. There's no balcony, no ledge. Just air. By the 3rd night, you were curious enough to lift the curtain. Nothing. The city was asleep. The streetlights buzzed. The window pane glared back your own tired reflection. You started checking before bed. Locked windows. Curtains drawn. Even stuffed a towel into the silk crack. But it didn't help. The tapping came again, like it knew you were listening. Sometimes it seemed closer, like it wasn't coming from outside at all. Like it was inside the glass. On the 7th night, you stayed up. Determined. Coffee. Lights on. Eyes wide. No tapping. Not until you blinked, just once, and when your eyes opened, you saw the foggy print of fingers on the inside of the glass. Just fingertips. Pressed gently. Smudged, like breath. You haven't opened the curtains since. But tonight, you noticed something new. The tapping didn't stop at 3 knocks. It tapped 4. Then 5. And then, it started spelling. You counted. You listened. T-A-K-E-M-E. You haven't opened the window. Not yet. But the glass is starting to crack. Sleep well. It started with a noise. Nothing loud, just a tap. Not even a tap, really, more like a question mark scratched into silence. Daniel shifted under his thin duvet, eyes half-lidded, brain softened by sleep. For a moment, he wasn't sure if the sound was real or dream. The room was steeped in blue shadow. The old wall heater hummed like a distant insect. A car alarm wailed somewhere far below, muffled by layers of brick and city fatigue. Then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. 3 deliberate knocks. He sat up slowly, blinking against the dry air. The digital clock on his nightstand glowed, 2:13 a.m. His eyes slid toward the window. It was shut, curtains drawn. No breeze. 6th floor. Nothing but the old alley below, sealed in concrete. He rubbed his face. Probably the heater expanding, he mumbled, not believing it. Still, he walked to the window. Pulled the curtain an inch. The city blinked at him, indifferent. Cold glass. Nothing on the other side but rooftops and the skeletal glow of apartment windows across the street. Most were dark. Except one. A dim blue flicker, a TV left on maybe. He could almost make out a shape, still and hunched. He released the curtain. Creaking back into bed, Daniel let the quiet return. He didn't fall asleep right away, but eventually, the night settled over him. Daniel didn't think about the tapping until the next night. He worked late again, data cleanup at a marketing agency where the most excitement was when someone discovered a duplicate email list from 2019. When he got home, he tossed his bag down, kicked off his shoes, and microwaved leftover pasta that had cemented into one gelatinous brick. Another glamorous evening, he thought, twirling a fork half-heartedly. By 11 p.m., the apartment was quiet. Just the low hum of his fridge, the occasional whisper of cars far below. He lived alone. Had since moving to the city 3 years ago. No roommates. No pets. No drama. Daniel liked it that way. But sleep didn't come easily that night. He turned on his side. Then his back. Then his side again. The air felt heavier than usual. Oppressive, almost. Like the whole apartment was holding its breath. And then. Tap. He froze. The clock glowed, 2:13 a.m. It was the exact same time. His pulse thudded against his ribs as he slowly sat up, blanket still half wrapped around his legs. He didn't want to look at the window. But he had to. He stood, quietly, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping beast. 1 step. 2. The curtain loomed in front of him like a theater veil, waiting to reveal something awful. He took a deep breath and pulled it aside. Nothing. The city outside remained still. A plane blinked across the sky, indifferent. Then he saw it. A shape across the street. The same window as the night before. Still illuminated by that blue glow. But now, the figure was closer to the glass. Taller than before. Upright. Staring out. Daniel leaned closer, squinting. His breath fogged the glass in front of him. The figure didn't move. No motion. No flicker. He blinked, and it was gone. He rubbed his eyes. Sleep. I need sleep. The tapping didn't come again that night. But he noticed something he hadn't the night before. A single, faint smudge on his window. Like a fingertip had touched the glass. From the inside. Daniel woke up groggy, a dull weight pressing behind his eyes. He dragged himself into the kitchen, started the kettle, and stared at the fridge like it owed him money. But he couldn't stop thinking about the fingerprint. He hadn't dreamed it. It was real. After pouring his coffee, he walked back to the bedroom. The window caught the morning sun awkwardly. It was always a little dirty, always a little fogged. But now, in the daylight, he could see it clearly. One long, narrow smudge. Right in the center. About the size of a fingertip. He pressed his own finger beside it to compare. His was broader. Shorter. Whatever had left that print, if it was a print, had strangely slender fingers. Almost delicate. Daniel chuckled dryly. I'm comparing handprints with a ghost now. Great. He cleaned the glass with a swipe of his t-shirt and told himself he wouldn't think about it anymore. That night, he went to bed with the curtain drawn, window locked, and his TV playing an old sitcom at low volume. The tapping didn't come at 2:13. It came at 2:11. Tap, tap, tap. Then silence. Daniel sat up, heart already pounding. He stared at the clock. 2 minutes early. The curtain was glowing faintly from outside, maybe moonlight, maybe something else. He reached for his phone and started recording, camera aimed at the window. The tapping came again. This time louder. Tap. 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 Then, a pause. And a second round. Tap. Tap. Only 2. Daniel whispered, more to himself than anyone else, it's changing. He crawled to the window, not pulling the curtain back this time, just listening, recording, phone shaking slightly in his hand. Then, something new. A breath. He didn't hear it as much as feel it. A warmth against the cold pain. Just one exhale. Not his own. Then silence again. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night. In the morning, he checked the video. The tapping was there, sharp, rhythmic. The breath wasn't. But the strangest part. The video showed no sound at all after the second tap. Complete silence. Like the mic had been turned off. Except, at the very end of the clip, a frame glitched. Just one. It showed something standing on the fire escape. Daniel didn't have a fire escape. Daniel stared at the still frame, thumb hovering over the pause button. It lasted less than a second. A flicker, blink and you'd miss it. But when he slid the playback back and tapped forward frame by frame, it was unmistakable. Someone was standing outside his sixth-floor window. At first, it just looked like a shadow. But the closer he looked, the clearer it became. A person, tall and thin, dressed in something dark that clung to them like wet fabric. Their face wasn't visible, obscured by a blur, as if the camera had refused to focus on it. But what truly unsettled Daniel was the posture. It wasn't someone standing on the fire escape. It was someone pressed against the window. Arms limp at their sides. Head tilted slightly, as if listening. Daniel rewound. Played it again. Still just one frame. He closed the app, locked the phone, and set it down on the kitchen counter. The room felt colder now, the kind of chill that crept under your skin and into your thoughts. "I need to get out of here," he said aloud, hoping the sound of his own voice might anchor him. Just for the day. By noon, he was walking through the city, aimless but grateful to be surrounded by the chaos of normal life. He wandered through a bookshop. Bought a sandwich. Sat in the park. But even under the bright July sun, the image haunted him. That thing had no business being there. The window didn't open wide enough for a person to climb in. There was no balcony, no ledge, no fire escape. It was just air and concrete below. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Daniel. Why did you close the curtain?" He stared at the message, heartbeat skipping like a scratched record. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Another message. "I see you." No link. No scan. Just words. Daniel blocked the number instantly, hand trembling. He headed straight home, paranoid now, scanning every reflective surface he passed. In a shop window, he swore he saw something move behind him, but when he turned, no one was there. When he finally got back to his apartment, he hesitated before unlocking the door. Everything looked normal. But the curtain in his bedroom? It was open. And written on the inside of the glass, in a fine oily smear, were 3 words. "You let me." Daniel didn't step into the apartment at first. He stood in the doorway, frozen, staring into the bedroom where the curtain now hung askew, half open, swaying just slightly as if someone had recently touched it. That part was bad enough. But it was the message on the glass that made his skin prickle with a deep, crawling dread. "You let me." Written backwards, so the words faced in. Meant for him. He backed out. Shut the door. Locked it twice. Then he called Zoe. She picked up on the 3rd ring, voice groggy and suspicious. "Daniel? It's Sunday, man. Are you drunk? I need you to come over. Right now. Please." "What's wrong?" He hesitated. "Something's in my apartment." Zoe was silent for a beat, then said, "I'm on my way." They sat in a nearby cafe, mugs of cooling coffee between them. Daniel told her everything, the tapping, the prints, the video frame, the messages. The writing on the glass. Zoe didn't laugh. That's why he'd called her. She was the kind of friend who wore black nail polish and watched horror movies alone in the dark, because it made them feel less scary. When he finished, she tapped the edge of her cup. "Could be someone messing with you. A neighbor. I'm on the top floor. Still. People are freaks. I saw a guy free climb a building on TikTok once." Daniel pulled up the video. Showed her the glitched frame. She paused it. "Okay, that's definitely a person." "Yeah. But it's like, wrong." Zoe squinted, pinching to zoom. "This blur, it's like it's on purpose." Not like motion blur. Like the camera doesn't want to show their face. She looked up. That's not a tech problem, Dan. That's a story problem. What? She stood, grabbing her coat. Let's go. I want to see this window. Back in the apartment, everything seemed normal again. No open curtain. No writing. Daniel held up his hands. I swear. Zoe waved him off. No, I believe you. But maybe it wiped itself. That's how these things work, right? Trick the one person who saw it, then gaslight them with clean glass. She walked right up to the window. This is the one. He nodded. Zoe leaned forward and breathed on it. Mist bloomed across the cold surface. Then, slowly, 5 smudged fingerprints appeared from the other side. They were pressed against the glass. Long pale. Still warm. Zoe didn't move. Her breath still fogged the glass, just barely overlapping the 5 prints that had surfaced from nowhere. They stood there, together, caught in the silence. Not the comfortable kind. This one was listening. Zoe whispered, "You didn't do that, right?" "No," Daniel said hoarsely. "I haven't touched it since yesterday." Zoe slowly backed away. Okay. Okay. We need to know what this place is." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean this building. Something happened here. Or is happening. People don't just get ghost-fingered in their apartments unless the place has a history. I don't think this is a ghost." Zoe turned to him. "Then we really need to know." By late afternoon, they sat in the dusty reading room of the municipal archive, Daniel rubbing his temples while Zoe flipped through yellowed property documents with unsettling enthusiasm. "This building's ancient," she said, tapping a folded city register. 1924, it used to be a boarding house. But get this, it was shut down in 1946 after a man went missing from the 6th floor. A guy named James Holbrook. Daniel looked up. "Wait, my floor." "Your apartment, actually." I matched the lot number. Daniel felt a chill creep down his spine. "And they never found him?" "Nope. Said he vanished from a locked room. Police called it a suicide, but there was no body, no broken window, nothing. Just, gone." She flipped to another section. "And it gets weirder. The guy who owned the building said Holbrook had complained about noises. Tapping, he called it. Kept him up at night." Daniel felt a pressure building in his chest. "Jesus Christ." "Wait," Zoe said, squinting at the page. "There's a note in the margin." Tenant reported hearing a voice inside the glass. Repeating a name. Daniel leaned in. "What name?" Zoe's finger traced the handwritten scrawl. "Lethe." Daniel frowned. "What's that mean?" Zoe was already searching. "It's Greek. From mythology. The river Lethe, people who drank from it forgot their past lives. It's the river of forgetting." They stared at each other. Daniel said slowly, "You think that thing wants to be remembered?" Zoe didn't answer right away. She just looked out the archive window, where the sky was beginning to darken. Then she muttered, "I think it wants you to drink." That night, Daniel didn't even try to fight sleep. Zoe had gone home, reluctantly, after insisting he keep every light in the apartment on. She even left him with a pouch of salt, just in case it's, like, demon rules, which he sprinkled half-heartedly in front of the bedroom window before locking it twice. Still, the tapping came. But this time, Daniel wasn't awake to hear it. He dreamed. Not the usual hazy, shifting kind. This one was exact. Crisp, like reality, but off in subtle, wrong ways. In the dream, he was in his apartment. Everything was the same, the floorboards creaked in the same spot near the kitchen, the fridge buzzed with its familiar hum, the smell of coffee lingered in the air. But there were differences. The walls were grayer. The light bulbs dimmer. And the clock on the nightstand blinked 2:13, over and over, like a heartbeat. He walked to the window. He didn't mean to. Something pulled him there. Outside, the city was wrong. No movement. No headlights. Just dark buildings like tombstones. A vast silence. Then the window started to ripple. Like the surface of a pond, disturbed by breath. And behind it, a face began to form. It didn't push forward, it unfolded, pressed into the other side of the glass as if it lived within it. No eyes. Just skin where eyes should be. The mouth opened, slow and slack like it had forgotten how. And then it said his name. Soft. Gentle. As though it missed him. Daniel. He tried to step back. Couldn't. His feet were frozen to the floor. His reflection vanished from the glass. Only the other face remained. "Let me in," it whispered. Its voice wasn't angry or harsh, it was lonely. Like it had waited a long time. He wanted to scream. Wanted to wake up. But the voice kept talking, sweet and sad and dead. "I don't want to be forgotten again." He looked down at his hands in the dream. They were made of glass. Cracks spidered across them with each heartbeat. Then the tapping came. From inside him. Tap. 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 He woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. It was still dark. The clock blinked. 2:13 a.m. Again. And this time, the tapping wasn't at the window. It was coming from the mirror. Daniel's breath hitched in his throat. The tapping continued, steady, slow, almost deliberate, coming from the bedroom mirror. He stared at the polished glass above his dresser. The pale moonlight filtering through the curtain barely illuminated the room, but the mirror shimmered strangely, like liquid silver. He hesitated, heart pounding in his ears. "Who's there?" he whispered, voice cracking. The tapping stopped. For a heartbeat, all was silent. Then. Tap. Tap. Twice this time. Daniel's reflection was supposed to mimic his every movement. But it didn't. It blinked later than him. First, his eyes widened in fear. Then, the reflection smiled. Slowly. A cold, cruel smile that didn't reach its eyes. Daniel took a step back. His reflection raised a finger and pressed it against the glass from inside. The mirror rippled. The glass seemed to thin, like water. Then the reflection's hand pushed through the surface. Daniel's heart hammered as he watched a pale, translucent hand emerge from the mirror's depths. A voice, barely audible, whispered from the dark. "Let me out, Daniel." He turned toward the window, eyes darting between the mirror and the glass pane. The tapping returned, now faster, more urgent. Tap 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 tap. The message was clear, it was trapped. Trapped inside the glass. And it wanted to be free. Daniel's mind raced. The thing in the mirror. The thing behind the window. Both the same, or at least connected. But how? He paced his apartment, clutching his phone like a lifeline. His fingers trembled as he called Zoe again. "Zoe," he gasped, "something's here. Not just in the window, it's in the mirror too." There was a pause. "Daniel, you sound like you're losing it," she said, voice skeptical but soft. "I swear, I saw it." The reflection smiled after I did. And its hand pushed through the glass. Zoe was quiet for a moment. "Okay. Weird is happening. Let me come over." "But Dan, maybe you should sleep somewhere else tonight." He swallowed the lump in his throat. "Can't." The tapping began again, this time loud and frantic. Tap 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 tap. He stared at the window. The cracked glass gleamed under the streetlight, like a portal. Zoe arrived 30 minutes later. She carried a backpack filled with candles, sage, and a thick book on folklore and spirits. "We're going to figure this out," she said, lighting the candles. Together, they opened the book. There it was, a story about a restless spirit trapped between worlds, bound to glass, who craved release but needed a host to escape. "The price for freedom," Zoe read aloud, "is possession. The entity takes over the living, erasing the host's soul." Daniel's blood ran cold. "You mean it wants me?" Zoe nodded grimly. "It needs you to open the window. To let it in. That's why it's tapping, and whispering your name." He looked at the window. The oily fingerprints seemed to pulse. The cracked glass wasn't just damage, it was a warning. And now he understood. If he opened that window, he'd lose himself. But if he didn't, it wouldn't stop. The room was heavy with candle smoke and silence. Daniel stood by the window, Zoe's words echoing in his mind. The entity wanted him to open the window and invite it in. His fingers hovered over the latch. The cold metal pressed into his palm, an icy weight. Outside, the city was quiet. The night wrapped the building like a shroud. Then, the tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it wasn't slow. It was desperate. Urgent. Daniel's breath hitched. A faint whisper drifted through the cracked glass. "Open, let me in." His heart screamed, but his hands refused to move. Zoe stepped closer, voice steady but low. "Daniel, you have to fight it. Don't listen. This thing feeds on fear, the moment you give in, it wins." The tapping grew louder. The glass trembled beneath his fingers. Then, a flash. The room blurred. Daniel's reflection in the mirror twisted into a horrifying grin. The entity reached out again. Daniel's vision darkened. With a scream, he slammed the window shut. Silence. The tapping stopped. The glass was whole again. But Daniel knew this was only the beginning. Because somewhere, behind the silence, the entity waited. And it was patient. "Want me to keep going?" The next parts dived deeper into the entity's origins and Daniel's battle to reclaim his life. The next day, Daniel felt hollow, like a shadow of himself. Zoe was still there, pacing the room, trying to plan their next move. "We can't just wait," she said, flipping through the folklore book again. "We need answers, real ones." Daniel nodded, dragging a hand over his tired face. "Maybe the landlord knows something. He's been here since forever." They called him. An old man with a voice like rust and rain. "Ah, the tapping," the landlord croaked. "This place has a history, son. Holbrook wasn't the first, and probably won't be the last." He spoke of tenants lost to strange disappearances, all tied to the 6th floor. Of windows that whispered names in the night. And of a name, Lethe, the spirit said to haunt the building, the one who forgot and wanted to be remembered. Zoe looked at Daniel. "You're part of the story now. It's tied to you." Daniel clenched his fists. "Then it's time to finish it. The tapping waits. The glass remembers." That night, Daniel barely slept. Every creak in the apartment sounded like footsteps. Every shadow held a secret. Around midnight, the mirror began to fog again. A breath, this time unmistakably not Daniel's. The surface shimmered like liquid, and the reflection twisted into something grotesque. But then, words appeared, etched like frost on glass. "Don't trust the window." Daniel recoiled. The entity wanted the window open. But the mirror warned him to beware. He was trapped between two doors, one leading inward, one outward. Zoe arrived just as Daniel was staring in horror at the message. We have to break the cycle, she said. Break what? Lethe's caught between realities. The window is its way out. The mirror? Its way in. She pulled out a small vial of salt water and began to sprinkle it on the floor in a circle around the mirror. Daniel felt a cold wind sweep the room, even though all windows were shut. The tapping stopped. Zoe flipped through the folklore book, reading aloud with a grim voice. Lethe was a spirit condemned to wander the boundary between life and death, punished to be forgotten by all. Bound to glass, the barrier between worlds, it seeks to reclaim a soul to escape its prison. Daniel shivered. So every tenant before me, they were taken by it, he whispered. Exactly, Zoe said. It chooses someone with a thin veil between the worlds, someone like you. Daniel clenched his fists, feeling the weight of invisible chains. We need to break the curse, Zoe said, but it won't be easy. Lethe feeds on memory, our fears, our regrets. We have to face it head on. Suddenly, the window rattled violently. Tap tap tap. A whisper floated through the room. Remember me. Daniel's vision blurred. His heart pounded in his ears as shadows danced on the walls. The room grew colder. Daniel stood before the mirror, eyes locked on the pale, shifting face staring back at him. Lethe's face. No eyes. No mouth. Just a blank canvas of sorrow and rage. You remember me, it whispered, voice like dry leaves scraping stone. Daniel's breath hitched. Memories flooded, faces, places, moments he'd long buried. Names he couldn't recall but somehow felt tied to. Why me? He demanded, voice trembling. Because you are forgotten too, Lethe replied. Forgotten by yourself. Forgotten by the world. The mirror rippled, and Daniel saw fleeting images, his childhood, lost friendships, missed chances. Your soul is the key, Lethe said, to freedom. Daniel's reflection, his true reflection, blinked, desperate to break free from the glass prison. Zoe's voice echoed behind him, steady and strong. Fight it, Daniel. You are not forgotten. Gathering his courage, Daniel reached out, touching the mirror. The surface burned. The tapping stopped. For a moment, silence. The crack raced like lightning across the mirror's surface, spiderwebbing from corner to corner. Daniel's hand burned, frozen in place as if the glass itself was trying to hold him back. Zoe grabbed his arm, pulling him away just before the mirror shattered with a deafening crash, shards spraying like frozen rain across the floor. For a moment, the room was silent. Then the tapping began again, this time from the window. Tap, tap, tap. Daniel and Zoe exchanged terrified glances. But something was different. The tapping was slower now, almost hesitant. The broken mirror no longer held Lethe's face. Instead, a soft glow pulsed from the cracked glass of the window. Daniel stepped closer, heart pounding. The window, previously locked and sealed, now showed a faint, flickering outline of a doorway. A doorway between worlds. Zoe whispered, it's the last chance. If you open that door, Lethe escapes. But if you close it, maybe we can trap it forever. Daniel reached for the latch, fingers trembling. His mind screamed to run. Daniel's hand hovered over the window latch, the weight of all the nights, the tapping, the whispering, and the faces pressed on him like a crushing tide. Zoe, he whispered, voice raw, what if I open it? What if it takes me? She took his hand, steady and warm. Then I'll fight it. We fight it together. You're not alone. The tapping slowed to a deliberate knock. Tap, tap, tap. A voice echoed, barely a breath. Let me in, Daniel. His fingers curled tighter, sweat slicking his palms. Then, with a deep breath, he pulled the latch. The window creaked open, revealing a swirling void of shadow and light, a portal between worlds. From within it, a cold wind rushed into the room. The figure emerged. But this time, it was different. The face was no longer blank. It was his own. The room chilled as the figure stepped through the window's portal. It was Daniel, but not Daniel. A hollow mirror of him, eyes dark and empty. "Why do you resist?" The shadow whispered, voice like cracked glass. "I am what you forgot. What you hid. What you buried." Daniel's heart thundered. "I am not you." The shadow smiled. "But you are me. Without me, you are incomplete." Zoe stood behind him, chanting softly from the book of folklore, lighting salt candles that flickered fiercely. "Fight," she urged. Daniel squared his shoulders. "I remember. I'm not afraid anymore." The shadow lunged, but Daniel didn't flinch. He closed his eyes, reaching deep inside for the memories he'd pushed away, laughter of childhood friends, warmth of forgotten hugs, moments of joy buried beneath fear. With every memory, light bloomed around him, pushing back the shadow's darkness. "Remember," Daniel whispered, voice growing stronger, "I am more than what you stole." The shadow screamed, a sound like glass breaking, and recoiled. Zoe's chants rose louder, her salt circle glowing bright. The shadow shrieked and faded, dissolving into shards of glass that shimmered and vanished. The windows slowly closed behind them. The tapping stopped. The room felt lighter, almost warm, like sunlight after a storm. Daniel sank onto the floor, exhaustion crashing over him. Zoe sat beside him, eyes tired but relieved. "The tapping's gone," Daniel said softly, almost afraid to break the silence. Zoe nodded. "For now. But spirits like Lethe, they don't vanish so easily." He looked at the window, no cracks, no fingerprints, just cold glass reflecting the quiet city. "Do you think it's really over?" Zoe shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe it's waiting." Daniel shivered. "Waiting for what?" "For someone else," she said. They sat together, the candlelight flickering, the night calm but watchful. And somewhere, deep in the shadows beyond the city, a whisper floated. Weeks passed. Daniel tried to return to normal life, but the apartment never felt quite right. Sometimes, late at night, when the city was silent and the world seemed to hold its breath, he thought he heard it again. A faint, distant tapping. Just 3 soft knocks. Tap, tap, tap. He'd freeze, heart hammering, but the sound would fade, swallowed by the night. One evening, as he closed the curtains, his eyes caught a faint smudge on the glass. Not from inside. From outside. Long, slender fingerprints. He wiped the glass, hands trembling. And whispered. "Please, no more." The night answered only with silence. But deep in the glass, something watched. Waiting. Months later, Daniel moved out. He left behind the apartment, the window, and the memories that clung like cobwebs. But the building stayed. New tenants came and went. One night, a young woman named Mira moved into the 6th-floor apartment Daniel once called home. She unpacked her boxes, humming softly, unaware of the stories hidden in the walls. At exactly 2:13 a.m., Mira was jolted awake by a tapping. Tap, tap, tap. She blinked, heart racing, and saw it, 3 faint knocks on her bedroom window. She pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. Just the city lights. But on the glass, smeared faintly, were 5 slender fingerprints. Mira shivered and whispered, "Who's there?" The night didn't answer. Mira sat up, pulling the blanket tight around her shoulders. Her fingers traced the faint fingerprints on the glass, cold and almost oily to the touch. Why would someone be tapping this late? She wondered, heart pounding. She reached for her phone, ready to call the building manager, but hesitated. What if it was something else? The tapping came again, this time from inside the room. Tap, tap, tap. Not from the window, but from the cracked paint of the bedroom door. Myra's breath caught. She stood, inching toward the door. "Hello?" she whispered, voice trembling. The tapping stopped. Then a soft whisper echoed from the hallway. "Remember me." Myra's skin prickled with fear. She backed away slowly, eyes darting to the mirror across the room. Mira stood frozen, eyes locked on the mirror. Her reflection's smile lingered a heartbeat too long, too unnatural. A chill crept up her spine. Slowly, the reflection's smile twisted into a grimace. Myra's heart hammered as she stepped closer, but the reflection didn't mimic her movements anymore. Instead, it raised a pale hand and pressed it against the glass, inside the mirror. The room darkened, shadows pooling in the corners like ink spilled on white paper. Myra's phone slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering to the floor. She heard the tapping again, this time soft and sorrowful, coming from behind the mirror. "Remember me," the whisper breathed, filling the room. Myra's breath hitched. Mira backed away from the mirror, eyes wide with terror. The room seemed to close in around her, the air thick and heavy. Her reflection, no, that thing, smiled cruelly and pressed its hand harder against the glass. The tapping grew louder, echoing from every corner. Tap, tap, tap. A cold wind swept through the room, though every window was shut tight. Mira shivered, voice barely a whisper, "Who are you?" The whisper replied, soft but insistent, "I am Lethe, the forgotten. The one you can't remember, but who remembers you." Myra's mind spun. Names, faces, memories just beyond reach. The entity's grasp was tightening, and the tapping was the promise of what would come next. Mira spent the next day restless, haunted by the tapping and the whisper. She scoured the internet for the building's history but found only sparse mentions of old tenants and mysterious disappearances. Determined, she visited the local library and asked the librarian about the sixth-floor apartment. The librarian's eyes darkened. "That place, it's been cursed for decades. They say a spirit named Lethe haunts the glass, windows, mirrors, anything that divides worlds." Mira swallowed hard. "What happened?" The librarian leaned in. "A man named Holbrook disappeared there, long ago. Tenants have reported tapping, whispers, and reflections that aren't quite right. Some say the spirit wants to be remembered, and it takes those who forget." Myra's skin prickled. She glanced at her phone, 2:13 a.m. She shuddered. Time was running out. That night, Mira set up her camera facing the bedroom window and mirror, determined to catch whatever was haunting her. As the clock struck 2:13 a.m., the tapping began, soft, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. She watched the screen closely. Shadows moved unnaturally near the window, the glass shimmering like water. Suddenly, the mirror fogged. Words appeared, as if written by an unseen finger. "Find me." A cold shiver ran down Myra's spine. She whispered, "Who are you?" The whisper came again from the darkness, barely audible. "Lethe." Mira clenched her fists. This was no ordinary haunting. She was being called. To remember, to uncover, or to become forgotten forever. Determined to find answers, Mira visited the city archives early the next day. Dusty files and yellowed newspapers told a grim tale. James Holbrook, a tenant from the 1940s, vanished without a trace. Reports mentioned strange noises, tapping, whispers, and sudden cold spots. One entry caught her eye, a cryptic note in the margins reading, "He sought Lethe and became lost in the glass." Myra's fingers trembled as she traced the words. What had Holbrook done to deserve this fate? As she left the archives, the streetlights flickered, and a chill swept past her, like a breath from another world. She pulled her coat tighter and whispered. That night, Mira returned home, clutching a small silver locket she'd found in Holbrook's file, engraved with strange symbols. As the clock neared 2:13 a.m., the tapping started again, louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. The window's glass shimmered, rippling like a disturbed pond. Mira approached cautiously, holding the locket out. The glass began to crack, spiderweb fractures spreading from the center. Suddenly, a hand shot through the shattered glass, icy cold, grabbing her wrist. Mira screamed, but no one was there. She was alone, or so it seemed. The locket glowed faintly in her palm, pulsing like a heartbeat. The voice whispered once more. "Remember me." Myra's heart pounded as icy fingers gripped her wrist. She yanked her hand back, stumbling, the locket falling to the floor and glowing brighter with every pulse. The room grew colder, shadows deepening, wrapping around her like a suffocating cloak. Whispers filled the air, fragmented voices begging to be heard, memories longing to be remembered. Gathering every ounce of courage, Mira grabbed the locket and pressed it to her forehead. A blinding light erupted, filling the room with warmth and brilliance. The icy grip loosened. The cracks in the glass began to mend, the spiderweb fractures sealing as if time reversed. The voice, softer now, whispered. "Thank you." The tapping ceased. For the first time, the mirror reflected only Myra's face, tired but free. Days passed. Mira felt lighter, as if a weight had lifted from her soul. The tapping was gone. The whispers silenced. She decorated her apartment with fresh flowers and opened the windows wide, letting sunlight chase away the lingering shadows. Yet sometimes, in the quiet moments just before sleep, she caught a faint sound, a soft, distant tapping. Tap, tap, tap. She told herself it was just the old building settling. But deep inside, a tiny voice whispered. "Remember me." Mira smiled faintly, clutching the silver locket, a reminder that some shadows never fully disappear. Months later, Mira moved out, leaving the apartment freshly cleaned but still holding secrets. A new tenant moved in, a young man named Alex. On his first night, as the clock ticked 2:13 a.m., the familiar tapping echoed softly on the windowpane. Tap, tap, tap. Alex blinked, staring at the faint fingerprints smeared on the glass. A chill brushed down his neck as a whisper floated from the shadows. "Remember me." He shivered but smiled, shrugging it off as the creaks of an old building. But deep inside, the tapping continued, waiting for its next audience. Alex settled into the apartment with a nervous excitement. New city, new start. But that night, as the clock struck 2:13 a.m., the tapping began. Tap, tap, tap. He sat up, eyes wide, heart racing. The window was streaked with 5 slender fingerprints. Alex swallowed hard, voice barely a whisper. "Who's there?" No answer. Just the faintest breath of wind, chilling the room. The mirror fogged up suddenly, words appearing as if drawn by unseen fingers. "Remember me." Alex's reflection smiled, but he did not. The cycle had begun again. Days passed and Alex tried to ignore the tapping, but it grew louder, relentless and insistent. He found himself waking at 2:13 a.m. every night, heart pounding as the taps echoed through the dark. One evening, while searching online, he stumbled upon old forums filled with stories about the building, about Lethe and the missing tenants. The deeper he dug, the more the stories mirrored his own experiences. That night, the mirror whispered his name softly, calling him. Alex's reflection flickered, smiling cruelly, lips moving without sound. He realized the curse wasn't just haunting the building, it was hunting him. Alex stood before the mirror, staring into the dark eyes of his reflection, eyes that weren't quite his own. "Leave me alone," he said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. The reflection smiled wider, lips curling into a sinister grin. "You can't escape me," it whispered. "I am the forgotten part of you." Alex clenched his fists, recalling stories he'd read about breaking the curse. He grabbed a small vial of salt from the kitchen and drew a circle around the mirror. The reflection hissed and lunged, but the salt barrier held firm. With a burst of courage, Alex recited an incantation he found scrawled in an old journal. By light and memory, be banished to shadow. Return to the forgotten, where you belong. The mirror cracked. Alex felt a heavy weight lift but knew better than to think it was over. He covered the mirror with a thick cloth and sealed the window with salt-lined tape. Yet, late at night, faint tapping echoed, not from the window or mirror, but from the walls themselves. Whispers floated through the vents. Remember me. Alex shivered, realizing the curse might be deeper than he imagined. Outside, the city slept unaware. But inside, something was still watching, waiting, and tapping. Alex couldn't sleep. Every creak, every whisper made his skin crawl. The tapping wasn't just at the window or the mirror anymore. Now it echoed from inside the very walls of the apartment. Tap, tap, tap. At first, subtle, like the soft pulse of a heartbeat. But growing louder, more urgent. Alex pressed his ear against the peeling wallpaper. He heard faint voices, murmurs in a language he couldn't understand. Whispers promising release. And a name he dreaded. Lethe. He backed away, heart pounding. The apartment was no longer just a home. It was a prison. Determined to uncover the truth, Alex tore away the peeling wallpaper in the corner of his bedroom. Behind it, scratched into the plaster, were strange symbols, ancient and worn. Beneath the symbols, a faded message. To remember is to live, to forget is to die. His fingers trembled as he traced the words. The tapping grew louder, now a frantic rhythm, echoing from the walls themselves. Suddenly, a cold gust swept through the room. A whisper hissed. Find the glass. Free me. Alex realized the curse wasn't just in the apartment, it was bound to the building itself. And somewhere, deep inside, Lethe waited. With the cryptic message burned into his mind, Alex knew he had to find the glass, the source of Lethe's prison. He scoured the apartment, tapping walls, floors, and ceilings, searching for any anomaly. In the dusty basement, behind a loose brick, he discovered a hidden panel. Inside was a shattered shard of glass, covered in ancient symbols glowing faintly. The moment Alex touched it, the tapping echoed violently from every corner. Tap 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 tap. Whispers filled the air. Remember me. Free me. Alex gripped the shard tightly, feeling a cold energy seep into his veins. He understood, this fragment was Lethe's tether, a prison key and a weapon. The battle for his soul had only just begun. Alex held the shard tightly, its icy touch seeping through his skin. The whispers swirled louder, voices overlapping in a haunting chorus. Remember. 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 He could feel Lethe's presence pressing against his mind, trying to slip free. Determined, Alex grabbed a hammer from the basement toolbox. With trembling hands, he raised it high and brought it down hard. The glass shattered, sending shards flying in a cascade of sparks. A terrible scream echoed, piercing the silence, a sound filled with rage and sorrow. Then, silence. The tapping stopped. The apartment grew still. Alex collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. For now, Lethe was broken. But somewhere deep in the building, a faint tapping resumed. Tap, tap, tap. Days later, Alex tried to rebuild his life. But the shadow of Lethe lingered. Late at night, when the world was still, he'd hear the faint tapping once more. Tap, tap, tap. Not at his window. Not at his mirror. But somewhere deep within the walls. He knew then, breaking the glass shard only weakened Lethe. It did not destroy her. And somewhere, waiting patiently, Lethe's whisper floated on the cold air. Remember me, again. Alex's eyes darkened with resolve. The battle was far from over. Alex could no longer ignore the creeping dread inside his own home. Each night, The tapping came, softer now, like a ghostly heartbeat echoing through the silence. One evening, as he sat alone in the dark, a cold breath whispered across his neck. "Remember me." He spun around, but the room was empty. His reflection in the mirror shimmered, no longer his own face, but a shadowy void. The glass rippled, and a voice hissed. "You cannot run." Alex clenched his fists, knowing the shadow was no longer just outside, it was inside him. Alex's reflection no longer mirrored his movements, it acted with a mind of its own. Each night, the shadow grew stronger, whispering dark secrets and twisted promises. One evening, Alex stood before the mirror, eyes locked with his shadow self. "I won't let you take me," he said firmly. The shadow smiled, voice like shards of glass, "You already belong to me." Desperately, Alex grabbed a shard from the broken mirror and held it up. The shard glowed, and the room filled with blinding light. The shadow screamed, trying to retreat, but the light held it fast. Alex's voice rang out, "By the power of memory and light, I reclaim myself." The shadow shattered like broken glass, fragments scattering into nothingness. The mirror cracked but no longer held the shadow. Alex collapsed, exhausted but free, for now. In the quiet after the battle, Alex searched for answers. He found an old journal hidden beneath the floorboards of the apartment, its pages brittle but filled with desperate writings. The journal belonged to James Holbrook, the man who vanished decades ago. Holbrook's words told a tragic tale. He had uncovered an ancient curse tied to the glass, a spirit named Lethe, punished to wander between worlds, feeding on forgotten souls to regain life. Holbrook had tried to trap Lethe but was consumed by the very mirror meant to imprison the spirit. Alex realized the curse was a cycle, repeating itself with every new tenant. But the journal hinted at a way to break it, a ritual to sever Lethe's connection to the glass forever. Alex gathered the items listed in Holbrook's journal, a silver dagger, salt from the sacred spring, and a candle made from black wax. As the clock neared 2:13 a.m., he prepared the ritual circle around the bedroom window and mirror. Candles flickered in the dark, shadows dancing on the walls. He recited the incantation from the journal, voice steady despite the fear tightening his chest. The air thickened, the room trembled. The tapping returned, loud and furious, echoing from the window and the mirror simultaneously. Tap, tap, tap. A figure materialized in the cracked glass, a twisting, screaming form of agony and rage, Lethe. Alex's hands shook, but he held firm. With the silver dagger, he sliced through the air, severing the shimmering tether connecting Lethe to the glass. A deafening wail filled the room as the spirit dissipated into a mist of shadows. Then, silence. As the silence settled, Alex felt the weight lift from his chest. The room was calm, the glass clear. He dared to look into the mirror, his own reflection smiled back, unbroken. But then, a faint tapping came, not from the window, not from the mirror, but from behind him. He spun around. Empty room. The tapping echoed again, soft, almost gentle. Tap, tap, tap. Alex's blood ran cold. He turned back to the mirror. There, behind his reflection, stood a shadowy figure, smiling. "Remember me," it whispered. And the glass cracked once more. Alex stared in horror as the shadowy figure stepped out from behind the cracked glass, a perfect, twisted mirror of himself. "I am not gone," it said, voice cold as ice. "I am part of you. And you, of me." Alex tried to scream, but no sound came. The room blurred, darkness swallowing the edges. The tapping resumed, louder than ever. Tap, tap, tap. Alex was trapped, caught between the real world and the shadow realm, a prisoner of the glass. And somewhere, deep inside the cracked mirror, Lethe smiled. The curse was eternal. Alex's world dissolved into shadows and shattered reflections. He found himself trapped inside the mirror, an endless corridor of fractured glass stretching in every direction. His shadow self wandered beside him, whispering cruel truths and forgotten memories. "Welcome to your prison," it said, voice like shattered crystal. "Here, you will remember, forever." Outside, the tapping continued, a maddening rhythm against the glass walls of his new prison. Tap, tap, tap. Back in the apartment, the mirror hung silently, its surface smooth and clear. A new tenant would arrive soon. And the cycle would begin again. The apartment stood silent, its walls holding memories darker than the night. The old building groaned as a young woman named Elena moved into the 6th-floor unit. She unpacked her belongings, unaware of the curse lingering in the glass. As the clock struck 2:13 a.m., a soft tapping echoed through her bedroom. Tap, tap, tap. Elena froze, eyes drawn to the window. 5 faint fingerprints smeared across the glass glistened in the moonlight. She whispered, "Who's there?" No answer, just the cold whisper floating on the breeze. "Remember me." The mirror caught her gaze, and for a brief moment, Elena's reflection smiled back with eyes that were not her own. Elena's heart hammered as she stared into the mirror. Her reflection's smile faded, replaced by a shadowy figure lurking just behind. "Who, what are you?" she whispered. The mirror fogged, and faint words appeared. "I am Lethe. Forgotten, but never gone." A cold breeze swept the room. Elena's breath caught as the tapping started again, this time from the bedroom door. Tap, tap, tap. She reached for the light switch, but the room plunged into darkness. The tapping grew louder, closer. And in the blackness, a whisper promised. "Remember me." Elena fumbled for her phone, the faint glow barely piercing the darkness. The tapping echoed relentlessly, closer, sharper, like a heartbeat in her ear. Her breath quickened as the whisper returned. "Remember me. Remember me." Summoning courage, Elena moved toward the bedroom door. With trembling hands, she reached out and touched the cold doorknob. Suddenly, the room flooded with icy air. The shadows stretched, twisting into a form, pale, faceless, yet undeniably there. Elena gasped, her voice barely a whisper, "Who are you?" The shadow leaned closer, voice like a broken lullaby. "I am Lethe. And you will not forget me." Elena's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. "I don't want to forget," she whispered, backing away. But Lethe's shadowy form moved with unnatural grace, blocking her path. "You will remember," it said softly, voice dripping with sorrow and menace. The room darkened further, shadows wrapping around Elena like chains. She stumbled, almost falling, but something inside her flared, a spark of defiance. "No," she said firmly, "I choose to remember me." The shadow hesitated, flickering like a flame in the wind. Elena's reflection appeared in the mirror, smiling with her own eyes. The tapping slowed. The shadows recoiled. For now. Elena grabbed a candle from her nightstand, lighting it with shaky hands. The small flame flickered defiantly against the darkness creeping in. Lethe's shadow hissed, retreating but not gone. "Your light won't save you," it whispered, voice like brittle leaves. Elena held the candle higher. "I'm not afraid," she said. The room seemed to pulse with energy as the candle's glow grew brighter. The shadows twisted and writhed, desperate to snuff out the light. But Elena stood firm, chanting words she barely understood, a prayer, a plea, a promise. The tapping slowed, then stopped. Silence. She exhaled, heart still racing. For now, the darkness was kept at bay. Determined to end the nightmare, Elena searched the building's history. In the dusty archives, she found old newspapers and journals chronicling disappearances and strange events, all linked to the cursed apartment. A faded photograph caught her eye. A man staring solemnly at a shattered mirror, the same silver locket resting on the floor beside him. The caption read, "James Holbrook, last seen before vanishing without a trace." Elena's fingers trembled. She knew she had to find that locket. The key to Lethe's curse, and perhaps the key to her own survival. Elena dug deeper, tracing every lead she could find about James Holbrook. One evening, she visited a small antique shop downtown, clutching an old photograph. The shopkeeper's eyes widened when she showed him the picture. "That locket," he said quietly, "was brought here years ago. It's said to hold the spirit's tether." He rummaged behind the counter, pulling out a tarnished silver locket. Elena's heart pounded as she held it, cold to the touch, yet pulsing faintly. As she opened it, a whisper escaped. "Remember me." The tapping began anew, soft, insistent. Elena knew the final confrontation was near. Back in her apartment, Elena prepared the ritual described in Holbrook's journal. Salt lined the floor, the silver locket rested on an altar of candles, and the air buzzed with anticipation. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the tapping began, fierce and unrelenting. Tap, tap, tap. The room filled with shadows as Lethe appeared, a swirling mass of darkness and sorrow. Elena gripped the locket tightly, chanting the ancient words of release. Light burst forth from the silver, illuminating the room and pushing the darkness back. Lethe screamed, a sound both terrifying and heartbreaking. With one final chant, Elena shattered the locket on the floor. The shadows vanished. The tapping ceased. Silence. For the first time, the apartment felt free. The silence was almost unbearable. Elena sank to the floor, exhaustion and relief washing over her. The apartment felt lighter, the air clear and warm for the first time in months. She glanced at the shattered locket pieces, scattered but powerless. Yet, deep in the quiet, a faint sound teased her ears. Tap, tap, tap. She held her breath, heart racing. Was it a trick of the mind? Or had the curse truly been broken? Determined, Elena whispered, "I remember. And I will never forget." The tapping faded. For now. Days turned to weeks. Elena tried to live normally, but the quiet moments carried an unsettling weight. One night, as she lay in bed, a soft tapping echoed faintly from the window. Tap, tap, tap. Her eyes snapped open. She stared at the glass, breath caught. This time, the tapping was slower, deliberate, as if a final message. A shadow flickered behind the curtain. Elena sat up, heart pounding. A whisper curled through the room. "Until we meet again." The room fell silent. But Elena knew, some shadows never truly fade. Elena's heart pounded as she stared at the silent window. The night held its breath. Suddenly, the curtain swayed though no breeze stirred. A soft, cold whisper brushed her ear. "Remember." She swallowed hard, voice steady now. "I will." The tapping ceased. But in the depths of the glass, a faint smile lingered, a promise that this story was far from over. Elena closed her eyes, knowing some things are meant to be remembered forever. Weeks later, Elena had moved on, hoping to leave the darkness behind. But in a distant city, a new apartment awaited. Inside, a fresh tenant, Mark, unpacked his life unaware of the ancient curse. As midnight struck, a soft tapping echoed on his bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. Mark paused, eyes narrowing at the faint fingerprints smeared on the glass. A whisper curled through the night air. "Remember me." And just like that, the cycle began anew. Mark lay awake, staring at the window, the tapping still echoing softly in the silence. Tap, tap, tap. He hesitated, then pulled back the curtain. 5 slender fingerprints glimmered faintly in the moonlight. A chill ran down his spine. Suddenly, the mirror fogged, words appearing as if written by invisible fingers. "Remember me." Mark's reflection twisted, smiling with eyes that weren't his own. He swallowed hard, realizing the nightmare had found him too. Mark couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every night, At exactly 2:13 a.m., the tapping returned, louder, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. His reflection in the mirror began to change, eyes darkening, smile twisting into something cruel. One night, the mirror whispered his name. Mark's breath hitched. He realized the curse wasn't just haunting the apartment, it was consuming him. And there was no escape. Mark grabbed a candle and lit it, the flickering flame trembling in the dark room. The tapping grew frantic, pounding against the window like a desperate heartbeat. His reflection smiled wickedly, lips moving without sound. Summoning every ounce of courage, Mark chanted a prayer he barely remembered from childhood. The candle's flame flared, casting long shadows that twisted and writhed. The tapping slowed, then stopped. For a moment, silence. Mark exhaled, but deep down he knew the battle was far from over. Days passed, but Mark felt the shadow creeping closer. At night, the tapping morphed into scratching, nails dragging slowly across the windowpane. His reflection's eyes followed him even when he wasn't near the mirror. One evening, the lights flickered, and a cold hand brushed his shoulder. Mark spun around, empty room. A whisper echoed from the dark corners. "You belong to me now." He realized the curse was no longer outside, it had taken root inside his very soul. Mark's days blurred into nights filled with shadows and whispers. The tapping had become a constant, a maddening rhythm in his mind. He found himself drawn to the mirror, unable to resist the reflection's sinister smile. One night, the glass rippled like water. A hand reached out, pale and cold. Mark's scream was swallowed by the darkness as he was pulled into the mirror's depths. Inside, endless corridors of shattered glass awaited, a prison for forgotten souls. Outside, the tapping continued, patiently waiting for the next tenant. The apartment waited in silence, its walls soaked with memories and shadows. A new tenant arrived, Sophia, seeking a fresh start, unaware of the ancient curse. As midnight struck, the tapping began anew. Tap, tap, tap. She glanced at the window, fingers tracing the faint fingerprints. Behind her, the mirror shimmered. A voice whispered softly, "Remember me." And so, the haunting began again. Sophia unpacked her boxes, laughter echoing through the empty apartment. As night fell, an eerie silence settled. At 2:13 a.m., the tapping began, soft but unmistakable. Tap, tap, tap. Sophia froze, her eyes drawn to the window where faint fingerprints glistened. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Her reflection in the mirror distorted, a shadowy figure lingering just behind. A cold whisper filled the room. "Remember me." Sophia's breath hitched. The apartment was alive with secrets, and she was now part of its story. Night after night, Sophia felt the presence growing stronger. The tapping became a maddening rhythm in her mind. Her reflection no longer mimicked her, it watched, smiled, and whispered secrets only she could hear. One evening, the mirror fogged, revealing words scrawled from nowhere. "You will remember. You will belong." Sophia's heart pounded as the shadows thickened. She realized too late, the curse was not just in the glass, it was inside her. Sophia's nights became battles, between light and shadow, memory and oblivion. She lit candles around the apartment, their flames flickering wildly as the tapping grew furious. Tap, tap, tap. The mirror's surface rippled, and the shadow inside reached out with clawed fingers. "Remember me," it hissed, voice like shattered glass. Sophia closed her eyes, chanting a prayer she barely knew. The candlelight blazed, casting the shadow back into the glass. For a moment, silence. But deep down, Sophia knew the fight had just begun. The next night, Sophia awoke with a start, the tapping louder than ever. Tap. 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 This time, it came from both the window and the mirror. Sophia backed away, heart racing. Then the whisper came again, soft but clear. One crack, and the rest will follow. The glass wanted out. And it was breaking. Sophia stared in horror as a thick, inky substance oozed from the crack in the mirror, slowly sliding down the frame like tar. It pulsed with a sickly rhythm, alive, angry. She reached for the salt, circling the mirror as the shadows inside began to writhe, pressing harder against the glass. Their whispers grew louder, overlapping into one chilling chant. One must stay, for one to go. The room darkened. The candle flames bent toward the mirror as if pulled by a breath from the other side. Sophia's own reflection smiled again, lips parting to whisper. You were chosen the moment you opened the door. And then, the mirror cracked again. Sophia stepped back as the mirror split further, webbing out in every direction like a spider's web of glass. Behind it, the figures stirred. Faces warped by torment, mouths silently screaming. The black ooze spread across the wall, absorbing the candlelight, swallowing sound. Then, crack, the mirror shattered outward. But the glass didn't fall. Instead, it hung midair, frozen, a doorway now open. The whisper returned, louder, surrounding her. One must stay. One must stay. One must stay. A hand reached through, familiar. It was her reflection, begging. Sophia's voice trembled. Am I the one leaving, or staying? No one answered. Only the tapping remained. Tap, tap, tap. Sophia's reflection stepped fully through the broken mirror, barefoot, identical, yet wrong. Its eyes gleamed with knowing. Its smile was hunger. The real Sophia stumbled backward as the tapping turned to pounding. Tap 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 tap. The reflection spoke with her voice, only colder. You've carried the curse. Now it carries you. The mirror pulsed like a heartbeat behind them. The air thickened. I won't stay, Sophia whispered. Oh, but you already have, her double replied. Hands shot from the mirror, the other trapped souls, clawing, pleading, grasping. Sophia screamed as the glass rippled, pulling her toward the void. She grabbed the salt canister, flung it in a circle, and shouted the only word that burned in her mind. Remember. A flash of light. The reflection shrieked. And the mirror exploded into 1,000 shards. Silence. Darkness. Then, breath. Sophia lay on the floor, shaking, alone. Or so she thought. Behind her, in the window's reflection, a face lingered. Watching. Tap. Sophia boarded up the mirror frame and scattered salt across every threshold. For days, the tapping stopped. She dared to hope it was over. But then, one night at 2:13 a.m., the sound returned, not from the window or the walls, but from the floor. Tap, tap, tap. She knelt, ear to the hardwood. Beneath her feet, something shifted. A muffled whisper drifted up through the grain. You closed one door, but left another wide open. The boards were cold, pulsing like veins. She tore at them in panic, revealing a hatch sealed with rusted nails and a heavy iron ring. Etched into the wood, a familiar phrase. Remember me. Her fingers trembled as they touched the iron handle. From the hatch came a low, guttural moan, and one last, bone-chilling tap. Tap. Sophia stared at the iron ring, her breath shallow, heart hammering like a drum. The hatch throbbed beneath her fingers, not wood, but something alive. She didn't want to open it. But she knew the curse wouldn't stop now. With trembling hands, she yanked up the iron ring. The hatch creaked open, exhaling a gust of freezing air. A ladder descended into darkness. Stone walls. Damp earth. And far below. Tap, tap, tap. She grabbed a flashlight and descended, each rung groaning beneath her weight. At the bottom, a narrow stone corridor lined with broken mirrors, each reflecting twisted versions of herself. One of them blinked. Sophia froze. From the shadows ahead, a voice whispered. "Down here, we remember everything." And then came the tapping again, faster now, from all sides. The walls closed in behind her. She was inside Lethe's heart. And it was still beating. Sophia crept forward, flashlight flickering. The corridor of broken mirrors stretched endlessly, each reflection more distorted, versions of herself twisted in agony, screaming silently behind the glass. The tapping followed her, sometimes from behind, sometimes just ahead. Tap, tap, tap. Then she saw it, a door made entirely of polished obsidian. Etched into the surface in silver lettering. Lethe. Her hand hovered near the handle, but the door opened on its own with a hiss, as if exhaling decades of sorrow. Inside, a massive chamber lined with glass. The air hummed. Suspended in the center was a tall, narrow mirror, untouched, flawless, pulsing with a faint blue glow. And inside it, a woman. Still. Pale. Her eyes closed. But as Sophia stepped closer, the woman's eyes snapped open. They were her own. Lethe spoke, voice both distant and deafening. "You carry what cannot be buried. You remember what must not survive." Sophia raised the flashlight, but it flickered and died. And all around her, the mirrors began to tap. 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 The chamber trembled. Mirrors on every wall pulsed with life, reflections moving independently, 1,000 versions of Sophia, each trapped in some twisted loop of suffering. Lethe stepped from the flawless mirror with impossible grace, her bare feet not touching the stone floor. She wasn't entirely human, she shimmered, translucent at the edges, eyes deep voids filled with stars and sorrow. "You came," Lethe said softly, tilting her head. Sophia stood firm, heart thundering. "I want to break the curse." Lethe smiled, not cruelly, but with pity. "You can't break what you are," she whispered. "You carry the memory. That makes you mine." Sophia clenched her fists. "Then take it back." She raised her hand, revealing the last mirror shard she'd kept, hidden in her jacket pocket. Lethe's expression darkened. "That piece should not exist. It's the memory you tried to erase," Sophia said. "And now, I'm giving it back." She plunged the shard into the base of the flawless mirror. It cracked, violently. Lethe screamed, not in pain, but in rage, and the tapping turned to thunder. Bam! 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 The chamber began to collapse. The mirrors shattered one by one, and with each shatter, a scream echoed. Sophia ran, dodging falling shards, shadows clawing at her heels. Behind her, Lethe howled. "If you remember me, you'll never forget yourself." Then, silence. And a final shatter. Darkness. Sophia awoke gasping, covered in dust and glass, curled on the floor of her apartment. It was morning. Sunlight spilled through the window. The mirror was gone, only a clean stretch of wall remained. No shards, no frame. Nothing. Had it worked? She sat up slowly, pain blooming in every muscle. But the apartment was still. Peaceful, even. No tapping. No whispers. For the first time in weeks, Sophia cried, not from fear, but from the weight of stillness. She showered. Ate. Slept. 3 nights passed. And on the 4th, at 2:13 a.m., she sat in bed, waiting. The wind outside rustled the curtains. No tapping. No voices. Just silence. She whispered to herself, "It's over." But across the room, resting gently on her nightstand, was the mirror shard she had plunged into Lethe's prison. And etched into its surface now were 2 words that hadn't been there before. Thank you. Sophia stared, heart pounding. For the first time. Lethe was quiet. But was she truly gone? Or simply, remembering? Days passed in peaceful quiet. Sophia tried to rebuild her life, but sometimes at night, a faint memory stirred. One evening, as she reached for the shard on her nightstand, it pulsed softly in her hand. A whisper, barely audible, curled around her ear. Remember. She closed her eyes, breath steady. I remember. The tapping came once more, gentle, like a heartbeat. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, it was different. It wasn't a call for fear. It was a lullaby. A promise. That memories, even dark ones, can finally rest. Sophia smiled softly. And for the first time, she slept.